Okay, so this is what's happening today. It's really dark outside, so sorry for the shadows. I don't know what my hair is doing, I don't know why I did this, but whatever. And I just tried to paint my nails and kind of failed miserably. So that's where we're at. But whatever, I'm here to talk to you about dragons. So today I want to talk about the best dragon books that I've ever read in my entire life. I have quite a list, so let's get into it. So I've read a lot more books that have dragons in them, but these are ones where the story actually centers around dragons. So the very first dragon book that I can remember reading was one of these Dragon Chronicles by Susan Fletcher. I don't know which one it was. I know I've read a few of them. I'm not sure how many there even are. I always got them from the library, and even this one I got from the library book sale, so you can see how beaten up it is. This one is Flight of the Dragonkin, which is book 2 of the Dragon Chronicles. Each of these books features a female protagonist who can talk to dragons and somehow works towards saving them from the people that want to hunt them. As far as I remember, I haven't actually read these books in probably 15 years or so. This is high fantasy, but not difficult to read. I mean, I read it for the first time when I was probably 9. Most of these books are probably high fantasy, but there's a few that are not as well. So I'm doing these books in the order that I first read them. And the next dragon book that I read was this one, also from the library book sale. So this is the Enchanted Forest Chronicles by Patricia C. Reed. So there's actually 4 books in one. Dealing with dragons, searching for dragons, calling on dragons, and talking to dragons. This one is definitely middle grade kind of fantasy. It's an easier read and there's a lot of comedic elements in it. It's actually pretty entertaining. Even just the chapter titles, like for example, chapter 1 is called In which Cimmerine refuses to be proper and has a conversation with a frog. And all of the chapter titles are kind of like that. So these books are set in the kingdom of Linderwall. The main character, Cimmerine, is a princess who runs away to work for a dragon and is completely annoyed whenever knights and princes try to rescue her. And then there's a lot more adventures that happen after that with her and her dragon and various other hilarious characters. It's a really fun read and I actually want to reread it again soon. Probably my top dragon book actually, but it is hard to choose. The next dragon books are actually from quite a bit later. I kind of didn't read any dragon books throughout high school. I read other fantasy, lots of other fantasy, but forgot about dragons, I guess. And then I picked up Dragon Keeper by Robin Hobb in the bookstore in 3rd year of university, I think. I liked the first book but wasn't obsessed with it, but I did decide to keep reading them and ended up being completely obsessed with this entire quartet. The Rainwild's Chronicles are by Robin Hobb, who I've mentioned in another video already because I read her Farseer trilogy last year and I'm currently working on the Tawny Man trilogy now. So this is the first series that I read set in that world, and it follows a bunch of misfit kids who are sent on a mission basically to take care of these just hatched dragons. There are a bunch of different perspectives in these books, but 2 of the main characters are a girl named Temeraire and her dragon. Their relationship is actually really interesting because they really clash heads a lot, but they actually have a very similar personality, which is fun. The other characters are also amazing. The character arcs in these books are incredible in the dragons and in the people, and it's definitely high fantasy and really beautifully written. So I highly recommend these if you're interested in dragon books at all. The next book that I want to talk about is one that I don't own. This is right after I read the Rainwild's Chronicles and rediscovered my love of dragon books. So I was just looking for anything that had dragons in it, and I came across Dragon Quintet, which had a couple of authors that I recognized and a couple of authors that I really liked already. So I picked it up and ended up loving it. It's just 5 short stories about dragons, and my favorite one in this one was Joust by Mercedes Lackey. So this is just a nice short fun book about dragons, so there we go. The next dragon book that I read was actually Farmer Giles of Ham by J.R.R. Tolkien, and this is just a really cute, fun kid's story about an unlikely hero. He's very Hobbit-like, and his adventures with a dragon. So that's all I'm gonna say about that, but this version is so beautiful. It's got the gorgeous cover and like illustrations on the inside, maps, and just, yeah. So that's just a fun thing to have if you're a Tolkien fan and you like dragons. The next dragon book that I read after that was A Natural History of Dragons by Marie Brennan. I talked about the third book in my last book video, which was Voyage of the Basilisk, but I believe there are 5 books out now. I only own 3 and I've only read 3. Unfortunately, I can't wait to read the other ones, but I wait for them to come out in paperback so that I can have a matching set. So the first one is A Natural History of Dragons, and then we have The Tropic of Serpents and Voyage of the Basilisk. And again, these center around Isabel, who is a scientist, or in this world she is called a natural philosopher. She's researching dragons and uncovering all of this scientific information about dragons that no one before has really discovered, because dragons are reclusive and hard to find. So she goes on all of these adventures, and they're funny and well written, and she's such a strong, quirky character. These are great, so I can't wait to read the rest of them. The next dragon book that I read after that, again, this was in the midst of my realization that I love dragons so much. I kind of haven't gotten out of that phase yet, but I haven't read that many dragon books lately. Anyway, the next one that I read is The Reluctant Dragon by Kenneth Grahame, which I also don't own. This is a really cute, short, kind of fairy tale-esque about a boy who saves a dragon from a knight, which is always great because if you haven't noticed by the other books that I have been talking about, I prefer the stories where the dragons are on the good side, or at least most of them are. So this was a really cute book like that. The second last book that I'm going to talk about is Dragonhaven by Robin Mckinley, which I read last year. This one's a lot different than most of the other books because it's not high fantasy, it's low fantasy, I guess, set in our world. Basically it's set in our world except there are dragons. There's also some other weird fantasy things and kind of sci-fi things that are just mentioned but not really part of the story. This is the best story of dragon raising that I have ever read, and I think I will ever read. Like, I'm sorry, but I could not get through the Aragon books. I barely made it through the first one. And anyway, if you want a story about a teenage boy raising a baby dragon, read Dragonhaven, because Jake is the best narrator, first of all. He's so sarcastic and cynical and just like blatant about his opinions. He lives on a conservation area for dragons, basically. So Jake finds a completely newborn baby dragon who's an orphan, and takes her in, and basically raising her consumes his life. He no longer can do anything that is not related to raising this baby dragon. But it's also clear how much Jake adores his baby dragon, whose name is Lois, and he calls her his daughter and calls himself her teenage mom. So that's the main story, and then in the background of that is also they're trying to keep their conservation area running because they don't have enough money and people don't care about keeping dragons safe, and they're also kind of discovering a lot of new things about dragon culture. They're starting to shift how they think about dragons as being something other than just animals. They're a civilized species. It's just really interesting and probably one of the most unique dragon books I've ever read. So there's that. And finally, the most recent dragon book that I read, I just finished a couple weeks ago, and that is His Majesty's Dragon by Naomi Novik. And I'm going to definitely read the rest of this series if I can find it. I don't even know how many books there are, but this is the Temeraire series, and it's historical fantasy. It's set during the Napoleonic Wars. It combines 19th century Royal Navy type storytelling mixed with dragons, which is just great. Basically, the main character was a captain of a ship and then discovered a dragon egg, as is a running theme in a lot of dragon books, and the dragon hatches and ends up bonding to him accidentally. And because of that, he has to completely abandon his love of the sea and the navy and become an aviator, or a captain of the aerial corps. And the aerial corps is dragons that are basically like ships because they're so big that they can have an entire crew on them, but they actually take part in the decision-making process of tactics and things as well. And so Lawrence, the main character, is just thrown into this new world of being in the aerial corps and also training himself and his dragon in order to help with the war. So not only is that a really interesting concept on its own, but Lawrence and Temeraire are honestly so adorable. Obviously, I really love books that have a really good friendship at their core, and the friendship between Lawrence, the captain, and his dragon Temeraire is just really beautiful in this book. So I really hope I can find the next book soon. And yeah, so these are my favorite dragon books that I've read so far in my life, and I hope to read so many more because even though it was 2 or 3 years ago that I kind of rediscovered my love of dragons, it hasn't gone away, so I hope to find a lot more dragon books soon. Okay, hope you enjoyed this video. Bye!